Hello, everyone, and welcome to Full-on, your Fulham-centric football podcast. We're here to review yesterday's game against Everton. Joining me this week is the whole crew. So, hello, AJ, how you doing?
I'm all good. I'm all good.
Mozza, how you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Static as ever.
And and Drew, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Back from Liverpool, so yeah, all good.
All good, all good. Obviously, I think it's a bit more of a positive episode than last week, as frustrating as the result is. So we'll sort of jump straight into it. Drew, you were at the game yesterday. Obviously, last game that we'll play at Goodison Park, unless we get them in the cup in January. What was it like, mate? What was the atmosphere like? What was the experience like?
Obviously, for those that haven't been, Goodison Park is Everton are one of the original founders of the league. It's an old ground. It's got a terrific atmosphere. But yesterday was massively disappointing. I'm not talking about the last 90 seconds. The Evertonians were as quiet as I've ever heard them. They were louder outside the ground, actually. It was really, really strange. I've never heard Goodison as quiet as that. The game itself, which we'll come on to, I mean, they were hardly in it, but they were subdued. And I've never seen Goodison Park like that. I mean, the Fulham, to be fair to all the Fulham faithful that went, they were in really good voice, belting out the old classics. But for the rest of the ground, really, really quiet. Journey up there was pretty good, considering weather was great. And the football, by and large, if you're a Fulham fan, was pretty good. But yeah, it was the only thing probably worse than the Everton fans and the atmosphere was the actual Everton team. But yeah, it was good. It was a good day. It was a good day. I'm glad I went.
All right, well, we'll hit onto the game in a minute. AJ, obviously, looking at that starting 11 from yesterday, I think we're not really too surprised to see it was only really the one change in Diop coming in. How did you feel about that when you saw it? You know, were you frustrated by it? Were you happy by it?
I mean, we called it ultimately. In hindsight, I'm terribly disappointed that we didn't put Traore against Young at any point during the game. That feels like a wasted opportunity. But aside from potentially switching wings occasionally during the game, I didn't see anything wrong with the lineup. Apart from the obvious Andreas, but we'll gloss over that.
Well, I think we have to say ultimately off the bat is a way, way more positive performance by Fulham this week. You know, considering how negative we all came in, especially after that Villa review last week. Mozza and Drew and I, when we reviewed the Villa game last week, it was one of the worst reviews we've had to do because it was so subdued. There was no real positive to take out of it. As frustrating as yesterday's result was, and obviously drawing away at Everton, there was a lot of positives to take from the game. You know, there's a couple of negatives, a couple of things that are they're more frustrations than negativeness, I think. But I think ultimately, as a performance, it was actually pretty decent away from home at Everton. Mozza, looking at the game before we sort of break it down, how did you feel going into it, mate? Because we didn't catch up with you before the game. How did you feel going into the game?
I felt quite positive. I think we've done fairly well there recently. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we've been to Goodison Park in recent times, we've done all right. Obviously, there's a bit of history there with old Silva being the former manager and Iwobi joining us from them. But yeah, I didn't really have any doubt. I was expecting full 3 points, to be quite honest. Given Everton's form, I know as of now, it's 5 games without losses for them. If you'd asked me at the beginning of the season, I really would have sort of bet my house that they would be one of the teams to go down. Doesn't look like it's going that way for them now. Who knows? Still fairly early on in the season, but yeah, definitely expected a victory.
I think they're safe from going down. I think there's at the minimum 3 worse teams than them in the league, but you know we'll go for that. But it is quite funny that you know we went 42 years without winning at Goodison Park, and now we're unbeaten at Goodison in 5 games, which is sort of nuts for us. And you know, I do know that obviously the last Everton manager that actually beat Fulham was Marco Silva. and it was great to see him play, the way he played yesterday, because he set up to be very positive yesterday. And you can see that looking at the game itself. We'll look at the first half. We'll give that a quick breakdown. I'm struggling to see, looking at that first half, how it went in 0-0 at half time. Yes, Everton had a disallowed goal that was offside. It was clearly offside. I know that when we said it in the group chat, I was a bit worried that he may have been played on by Tete, but once I saw another replay, it was clear he wasn't. Other than that chance and one header that they had, we were completely in control of that half, to the point where, Drew, how frustrating was it that we couldn't score in that first half, that we had so many chances to do so? Like, what did it feel like?
It's difficult to explain. The disallowed goal that you just mentioned, Ash, came from the first actual passage of play that Everton put together. They hit the bar, if you remember, and it came out. And it was a concern on the terraces that the first time they'd actually tried to do something, they'd nearly scored, because we'd been so dominant. And for those of us that are part of the Fulham faithful, there was a growing concern that the dominance that we were displaying wasn't being turned into goals. AJ's our resident numbers whiz. I mean, I don't know what our XG was at the time, but we were pretty much, from what we saw, in total control without a real cutting edge. People generally happy with the performance, but there just seemed to be this lack of thrust in the final third. And Everton, I mean, it's very difficult to describe just how poor they were. Their midfielder, is it what's his name? Is it Gane?
Just Gane.
Yeah, Gay quality. But outside of that, McNeil looked quite good, but he was marginalised. But the rest of it, the back three of Keane, Tarkowski and Pickford, surprisingly very jittery. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm a massive Silver fan. I do sometimes wonder, though, if when we're on top, we should just commit, completely just pile in, because we made it more difficult for ourselves than needs be. But yeah, in terms of the actual passages of play, I mean, there was no complaints. But like I said, the only time they put anything together, they nearly scored. And that was a bit of a concern, because we've seen, every one of us in this room right now has seen that script before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's basically where we were.
Yeah, I think when you break down our chances in that half, that you look at, there was maybe 4 big Fulham chances to score in that half. The first one, obviously, being the Jimenez shot that he did really, really well to sort of take down the cross that came into him, and then sort of the way it came down to him, he sort of just swung it in, got a little soft foot onto it, didn't really trouble Pickford. The second, obviously, is a massive double chance that comes our way, where Traore breaks through quite a tight angle, but I think he did the right thing by shooting. Has a shot that's obviously, I think, is it Keane defends it, and then it goes back out wide, straight back in. It's headed back across, and Emil Smith Rowe, if any other player that might fall to him might probably have a chance of getting their foot and their hip up and over the ball to have a shot. He's just the shortest player on the pitch, and it's just unlucky for him that it's really hard for him to get his hip up and over the ball. But it was a clear cut chance, and then we had a couple more chances that sort of that were more half chances in the rest of that half that we should have scored. AJ, we were speaking during the game about Andreas Pereira, because I will add that I think that his performance yesterday was much better than the Villa game. But it is frustrating that there are times when he has opportunities to shoot and he doesn't. Why do you think that is?
Fear of missing. His confidence is shot at the moment. You could argue his confidence was on the up prior to the penalty incident, and then that probably shot another notch down it. We know we've got a strong reliance on confidence with our forward players. If you look at the likes of Muniz and Andreas in particular, they like to be in good goal scoring form, and neither are at present. So I think there's a reluctance for him to shoot, let alone shoot on his weaker side, where he feels he's not likely to get a good opportunity. But then he took some pop shots yesterday, which I thought you really shouldn't be shooting from there. So who knows?
Yeah, there were a couple of opportunities where, especially when he broke through in the box, and it was almost like he just didn't want to have the shot on his left foot. And it was really frustrating because there was a couple of opportunities where like you could think he could shoot, and then because he had to turn and go away, that didn't come on. But I don't want to bash him at all because I thought he played really, really well. I thought he controlled his part of the game really well. I thought his work rate was levels above what it was in that Villa game. I thought he worked so hard for the team yesterday. It was just those two minor things of the shooting that were frustrations. They're not even negatives, they're just frustrations because it happens. Mozza, going into half time, before we start talking about the second half, how did you feel at half time? Were you frustrated by the result? Were you worried as Drew said that you could see what was coming from a Fulham point of view?
I wouldn't say I was worried, but I was frustrated because from what I could see that we were the stronger side, the better side, and I was thinking, we're normally quite good when we are above before the end of the first half. So yeah, I wasn't too troubled, but my Fulham brain was going, oh dear, what might happen here? So that was where I was at, but I still kept the faith as always until the very end.
Yeah. I think the second half started how the first half sort of ended, really. I think we looked like we were the only team trying to attack. Everton looked very happy, as Sean Dyche often does in these teams, but they look very happy to be, they'll take their half chances when they can and they'll try break when they can, but they were very happy just to let us bring the ball onto them. And you can see from the sort of first 15, 16 minutes of that second half that, they were more than content to do that. What was lacking for us probably was just a little bit of quality. I think that Emil Smith-Rowe yesterday, again, had one of those games where he seemed like he wasn't really up to play and wasn't really up to speed. And it is quite funny because I sent a message in our group chat saying that I really feel like he needs to come off because he's having a really poor game. He seems to be ghosting. And it's almost the second I sent the message to say he's ghosting, he then picked up the ball on the halfway line, beat four men, passed the ball to Iwobi, who then beat four men and put the ball in the bottom corner, which was typical, group chat curse. But Drew, how did you feel about the goal, mate? It was a really well worked goal between the two of them. It was really well taken by Iwobi, who obviously.
What did I think? I'm totally on board with your comments about ESR, and I'm an ESR fan. And for those that have watched us before, I mean, us here on the podcast, that I've had my fair share of criticisms of Pereira, but yesterday, Pereira looked like the £34 million player in comparison. I mean, there are things you can criticize him about, but yesterday he was good. He was really good. Probably lacking in the final third, but then you could say that about a lot of the team, but the ESR Iwobi goal, didn't see it coming. Hand on heart, didn't see ESR doing that up to that point. If he'd have been pulled off, and Nelson had come on and you'd have moved Iwobi inside, or ESR had come off and you'd have brought on Kearney because we had such control in midfield and you wanted someone who could ping that incisive pass, I could have seen the rationale in both of those moves, and I wouldn't have batted an eyelid. But I mean, it was just quality. It was just absolute quality. It was a standout moment of the game by far. It lends credence, I think, to the view that Iwobi's better off inside. Iwobi is a very, very good player. Not a natural winger, but he's effective on the left. But I just think that at times, when either Pereira or AP are lacking, we could do a lot worse than put Iwobi in the centre of the field to give him a chance to affect play more, because he's got a goal in him as well. mean, I did feel yesterday. I mean, I thought Jimenez was great again, but too often he does look like, a lone warrior. And I would have liked to have seen the midfield take more responsibility and try and break ahead of him. I mean, I'm struggling to think, and I appreciate you boys were watching it live, and you've probably seen the highlights, and I haven't watched it, but I'm struggling to think yesterday of when a Fulham player ran from deep at their defence. Apart from the ESR made goal, I can't see it. I mean, but it was absolute quality. It really was. It was well taken. Yeah, and I mean, I too was completely on board with ESR being taken off up until that point, because I really didn't feel he'd had one of his better games. Interestingly enough, I was watching X or Twitter today, and Arsenal fans were talking about when ESR's playing a not having a good game, he can't play his way out of it because he's such a confidence player. We've talked about him before being quite shy and introverted. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Whereas Reece Nelson apparently just doesn't care and will just keep going. But no, I mean it was a cracking goal, and it was more than we deserved. Oh, sorry, I mean we definitely deserved it, and we deserved more. But yeah, I mean you could see in that moment why Silva had made ESR such a priority. I mean he looked everything that we thought he was going to be. And it was a great finish as well. So yeah, it was a cracking goal. But I think there's a strong argument that if Fulham broke beyond Jimenez and ran from deep to give him more support, I think they'd be more effective, which is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying we were so on top in the first half, but we just didn't seem to. We almost didn't have the courage of our convictions. Do you know what I mean? In the final third, I don't know what it looked like with you boys watching it at home, but you just wanted us to just be a little bit more merciless. Do you know what I mean? And just go for it.
100%.
You know, and we didn't. We seemed. I'm not saying we were gun shy, but there was just a lack of a cutting edge there. You know, you don't look at them and you think outside of Jimenez, who's really looking like scoring yesterday? Probably no one, until we obviously away we scored. But yeah, I mean, it was a cracking goal. Cracking goal.
AJ, how did you feel about the goal, mix? I know that we were talking about sort of taking our chances when we're putting pressure on. How did you feel about it?
Very happy it happened. At the same time, those moments of magic that get clipped up of ESR means that we continue to get Arsenal fans forever on our backsides, which is really getting under my skin. But if it means that we continue to perform, I can get over that. No, it's a good goal ultimately to make a point of what Drew said about players coming from deep. The only player I can think outside of that ESR goal that had any single moment like that was Kenny Tete almost scoring goal of the season. Dribbling from his own right back position right up to the edge of the box.
But that AJ, that's what it felt like being there, because it felt like Everton were vulnerable to that.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
We just didn't. It was almost like we didn't believe. You know, just go for it.
Yeah,
because they weren't getting to us. I mean, we'll come on to talk about defence because obviously Anderson missing. So for all of us, we were concerned about defence. Let's be honest, no one's gonna. But it was weird, AJ, watching it. It was like, you know, if only
ready to sit.
Yeah, and I just
felt ready to sit in their positions and have us pass round them. Whereas,
but
the second one player went on a run.
Exactly, but that's exactly my point, AJ. I just feel that we probably, if anything, gave him too much respect, or we were too frightened about getting caught on the counter. I don't know what it is. But
efficiency for efficiency's sake.
Maybe, mate. I don't know. I just I would like to kind of. I mean, it's not the Silver way, okay? Because he's very methodical and he plans everything. I mean, his plans have got plans, but. Yesterday, I just kind of feel if we'd have thrown caution to the wind and just completely bombed on, it might have been different. Because if we'd have scored early, I think we'd have scored more than one. You know, But 100%, that's just kind of how it felt to me being there. You know. But anyway, sorry, mate.
No, you're fine.
7 minutes later, obviously after we take the lead, we make the substitution where Traore come off. He'd played well, he'd ran hard, but he just sort of laboured a bit as that game was coming on. And we saw the change of Reece Nelson coming on, a substitute that we were all really looking forward to. You know, we all sort of earmarked him before the game as someone to look out for. I definitely was hoping that he was going to get a bit more game time this week, and he did. As soon as he came on, he looked amazing. Like literally a different class. Every time the ball he got to him, he managed to break free and get off the pitch. All that did though was lead to more frustration with the fact that our end product, that last ball in the box, that making sure someone's there to score, just led to more frustration because he was outstanding. He was absolutely outstanding. And I think if there's any Arsenal fans that want to gas a player up that they think that thinks amazing, they should do the one that actually still plays for them, not the one who's now been sold and plays for us, because he was absolutely amazing. And I think Fulham need to go all out and sign him in January. I keep being told, don't fall in love with known players. You shouldn't fall in love with known, but I'm in love. I love him. He's just amazing.
We did with Anderson. We
so
did with
good.
Mitrovic.
Yeah, no, he's so good. He's so good. And he then led the line for the next sort of 15, 20 minutes of the game where, we looked like we were so comfortable in the game. We were just attack after attack after attack, but they were attacks that had nothing, no meat at the end. There was nothing at the end of them. There was no, you never felt like we were going to score that second goal. We were huffing and puffing, and you were just hoping that there was going to be. I know we had another chance, a little bit later after scoring where the Iwobi had swapped wings and then tried to pass the ball through, and it was only because of a defender's leg that it didn't quite meet ESR to tap it in. But other than that chance, we didn't really look like we were going to score a second goal. And then obviously that leads us into the 88th minute where Marco did something that Marco doesn't usually do, which is bringing on an extra defender as a sub. It's not something he usually does, whether that's just because he's never really had any defenders on the bench that he trusts before. But as soon as he did it, we completely lost our shape defensively, and you could just smell that Everton were going to equalise. I don't know why, but they didn't look like they were causing us any damage. They were a boxer that weren't throwing any punches, and I didn't. It's so frustrating that obviously they then get their equaliser through one moment of, I'm not even going to say it, excellence from Beto, because it isn't. It's just poor defending. And it's almost like bringing on that third centre back. Everyone forgot who they were meant to be marking, and it just didn't quite work. Mozza, frustrations obviously with conceding that goal. How did you feel about the equaliser? We're now looking at 5 drop points from late goals this season, which could come back to bite us in the backside. But how did it feel for you?
With doing my best without swearing out loud when I saw that happen, I went, "Oh, for F's sake!" And but again, I just sort of had to kind of laugh, because what do? You cry. You don't do that. But again, it's Fulham. It's Fulham, innit? Like, I could feel it coming. Like you were just talking about the subs. I think we were too hasty in taking those players off, and I'm not too sure why either. Like why those substitutions were made. I can't still get my head around what the mentality was for Silva doing that. But we really should have killed the game off earlier anyway. As we were saying, just going back to the first half, we had a second goal. I think Marco Silva said it in his post-match interview as well. Had we got that second goal, then that would have completely deterred them as well. So yeah, it might be one of those must-win games, as you say. It might come back to bite us on the arse in the future. But yeah, games like that we should be winning. And I know we don't always have the best record away from home, but disappointing just to come away with only a point in the bag.
AJ, 5 points dropped now for late goals. We include the Man United for opening game of the season, the West Ham home game, and this weekend's game. What do you think it is there? Do you think it's effort? Do you think it's mentality? Or is it quality? What is it that we keep conceding these late goals?
Lack of professionalism is what I'd call it. Every single late goal that we've conceded and that we've spoke about on the podcast, we can go back to the same thing. we don't see out games the way we're supposed to. We should be controlling the ball, maintaining the ball, holding on to the ball. And when we can't do that, it should be going into their far corner and holding up the ball as best as possible. We shouldn't be, pardon my language, but fucking about with the ball in the 90 plus 4 minutes of a game and conceding ridiculous opportunities, which then allows Ashley Young to sneak in at the far post, despite the fact that we've brought on an additional left-sided defender, which gives us Robinson, Bassi, and Kukea, or however it's pronounced, that are supposed to be covering that space. Like, it's just lack of professionalism from my standpoint. And I know there's a sense of irony from someone that's never played professional football sitting there and saying they need to be more professional, but like, we've seen what it takes from being professional. And there's an argument that where half of our players have come from in Arsenal are very good at those sort of underhanded tactics of holding up the ball and wasting time and knowing how to see a game off. Granted, they didn't do so today as we record on Sunday, but they are good at it. And maybe we need to take a leaf out of the dark-handed book from time to time when we need to see out a game in these ridiculous late minutes of a game.
Yeah, obviously we're going to end this episode how we always end these episodes. We're going to go around and get everyone's, honourable mention, man of the match, and we'll go from there. Drew, let's start with you, mate. You were at the game. Give us a couple of honourable mentions and your man of the match for yesterday's game.
Honourable mentions. I suppose Iwobi for scoring the goal. I think you've got to give a nod to Pereira. I mean, after the disaster that was Villa, I mean, he came back as strong as he could have done, really, without scoring. Tete was immense. Berge is looking more and more like he's getting used to how the team plays. Just taking a step back, you were talking about the substitutions. One of the things I was disappointed on when we did make the substitutions, not so much that we went for 3 centre-backs, although I thought that handed the initiative to Everton. It was the fact when Reed came on, he didn't go into the 6 role and move Berge further forward, because he looks so much better when he is literally powering forward because he's so big. But I think I will. I mean, there was some really good performance yesterday, but I think I'm going to go for Diop. Everyone was worried when we lost Anderson, but I cannot tell you, he was a wall. He was literally a brick wall. I mean, they got through a couple of times and he covered. He went on some mazy runs. I don't blame him for the goal. Ironically enough, I think, AJ, you mentioned we lost our defensive shape when we went to 3 centre-backs. If you look at the goal we conceded, I do wonder if people would actually lost sight of what they were meant to be doing, because Young had so much space in the left-back position. And Robinson, if you watch it again, he's just caught ball watching. But yeah, I think Diop, I mean, he was out the 2 centre-backs yesterday, and I'm a massive Bassi fan. I thought he was excellent. I really did. And I thought that whatever happened yesterday, it wasn't because we were missing Anderson. Yeah, it wasn't because we were missing Anderson. And I think that's probably the highest compliment I can give him. And don't get me wrong, there were good performances, but maybe for sentimentality reasons, I'm going to give it to him, because he was perceived to be the weak link, but he was absolutely immense. And good on you, Issa, if you're watching.
AJ, what about yourself, mate? Give us a couple of honourable mentions and your man of the match.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I was reading some of the key facts from the game while Drew was giving his. Emil Smith-Rowe had the most accurate passes in the game, 96%. Ironically, Andreas Pereira lost the most duels in the match, but I think that's mostly because he was actually trying to be productive with the ball, which I can't fault him for at all. And even when he did lose the ball, the effort he was putting back to win it back is something we haven't seen from him for the rest of the season. Tete had a pretty solid game all round. He pretty much completely shut down Dwight McNeil and I, who have been very dangerous all season so far. But it's difficult to not agree with Drew and say that Diop made it look like we shouldn't have to worry about Anderson being out in future. Yes, Anderson is the better player, but we're not sat there absolutely screaming if Anderson has to miss a game or two. Diop is very, very good cover, clearly, and knows what he's doing. Interesting little tactic from Diop in that he's not as natural with those diagonal balls. So he was actually working with Leno to have Leno deliver the diagonals, which was quite funny to watch during that game. But yeah, overall, I have to give it to Diop.
And Mozza, what about you, mate? Give us a couple of honourable mentions and your man of the match for the game.
Yeah, I'll keep mine fairly short and sweet. As you well know, I'm a Pereira apologist. But that's not to say I haven't fallen out of or I fell out of love with him after recent performances. But I thought he was a different man in that game yesterday, and I think like that is a good part of his sort of story arc. And hopefully, it's not a villain story or origin story of that sort. But yeah, I was very happy with his performance yesterday, and I think maybe in his mind he thinks he's got something to fight for and something to prove. So long may that continue. It would be obvious to say Iwobi being man of the match as the goal scorer, but I'm actually going to give it to Raul Jimenez. Just from what we were saying earlier, he looked like he was up for the fight again, as he was in the last game. And again, long may that continue. I think, well, I hope we've got a lot more goals to see from that man.
Yeah, I think let's look at it. I'll give you mine and be quite assertive with it. You know, honourable mentions. I thought Diop was outstanding yesterday. I think for a player who knows that he's not going to be playing next week when Brentford turn up at the Cottage, he's not going to be playing. You know, he was outstanding as he was the games before Anderson turned up. He was really good this season. Yeah, my only thing with Diop is that there's always something in the back of your brain that he's going to make a mistake or do something wrong. But to his credit, he hasn't done that this season. And when we needed him, he's turned up. So we'll go with that and say that's great. Jimenez, you know, last week was outstanding. He was the only player that any of us could point out and say he could walk off of that pitch with any. We said how high. Yesterday, what I think is quite telling from that is that he was outstanding yet again, but everybody else looked just as good as him yesterday, which just goes to show how well everyone raised their game this week compared to how they played against Villa. But for me, you know, not because he scored the goal, but because his versatility and his usefulness in Iwobi is, for me, is why I would pick him to be man of the match. I thought he was outstanding in every position he was asked to play in yesterday. He took his goal extremely well. He was a nuisance attacking wise. He was assertive when he needed to be to win the ball back when we were trying to win the ball up at high line. And he was one of those players. I think for me, he was just outstanding yesterday. And you know, he's had a couple of really good games for us against Everton. And he's had a few really good games this season for Fulham. But for me, he just picked it up another level yesterday. And I would go for that. Obviously, I can honourable mention almost every single player on that pitch yesterday, and it is really hard to pick a man of the match from that. You know, Tete being one of those players as well that's been mentioned that he was outstanding, but I'm going to go for Iwobi from that. But obviously, we'll go two against 1-1. That our man the match should be Diop. It's fully deserved, really. You know, he put in a really good performance. He looked assertive. He looked calm, and just like Drew, I don't blame him for the goal that we conceded. If anything, the slight lack of loss of shape because of that defensive substitution that we made sort of doesn't help anyone there. So we'll go with that. Guys, thank you very much for joining me for this review of this game. We'll be back at the end of the week with our preview to the Brentford game coming up next Monday night, which obviously will be an exciting one to talk about with that and what that is. Other than that, there's not much more else to say. Thanks everyone for joining us. Please like and subscribe to the show. Share it with your Fulham mates, you know, help us grow. Other than that, thanks very much. Come on, you Whites.